this includes subjects like math, science, and social studies. So we're going to be talking about how to integrate nutrition education into these subjects. And my name is Carolina Arengo, and I work in the Division of Health and Wellness under the Healthy Schools and Wellness Programs team. Our team's goal is to collaborate, coordinate, and equip individuals and organizations with the appropriate resources and support for healthy environments in school settings. And so this includes providing quality health and physical education, environmental and health literacy programs, and school services. And my position is that of the nutrition education specialist. So I'm a dietitian, and I focus on providing resources and technical assistance to schools and educators to enhance the nutrition education that's provided to the students. In today's webinar, we will briefly cover the objectives to start off. We'll talk about nutrition education, what it is and why it is important. And then we will go over different subjects and cover how nutrition can be incorporated into each of these subjects. And the best way to do this is by looking at the educational standards you have to cover and aligning these so that you can be sure that you're covering concepts that students need to learn. So I will go ahead and give you an example of how you can do this. And then lastly, we are going to talk about resources that are available to you through OSSE and some federal resources. And I will answer any questions that you may have at the end. If any questions do come up throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them in at the dashboard as they come in, and I'll make sure to address those at the end. All right, so after attending this webinar, we are hoping that you understand the evidence that supports the link between healthy eating and academic achievement. So we are going to talk about why it is important that students learn these concepts. We hope that you are able to recognize ways in which you can incorporate nutrition education into existing lesson plans, and that you're also knowledgeable on resources and tools that you can use to choose appropriate nutrition education curricula and activities. All right, so nutrition education. We'll start off with the whole school, whole child, whole community model, which is the model that you see here on the screen. This is a model by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC. And you may already be very familiar with this model, but I always like to include a slide of it in presentations because it is important to remember that there are many components necessary in order to promote a child's healthy development. So the model demonstrates the importance of various sectors working together to ensure that the necessary components are present in order for each child to feel challenged, supported, engaged, safe, and healthy. And if you're looking at the model, you see the child in the center and you see the green around it. And those are what CDC calls the whole child tenets. And just thinking of these, we can visualize how a child that has all of these components is a healthy child that is ready to learn. Nutrition education is a form of health education, which we see circled here at the top. And as defined by the CDC, health education is education that consists of a combination of planned learning experiences that provide the opportunity to acquire information and skills that students need to make quality health decisions. So it's not just about them acquiring the information, but about also developing those skills. And when we're talking about nutrition, we could be talking about facilitating a voluntary adoption of food choices or having them adopt other positive food and nutrition-related behaviors. And this model acknowledges that the education piece is not enough. It is not, just education by itself, but that we need to take a comprehensive approach, and that's really going to enhance the likelihood of us having positive results. So thinking about how nutrition education can be incorporated into these other components, which are the components that are represented here in blue, is very important. And I won't go into great detail right now about this, but you can see how nutrition education can be easily tied to employee wellness and family engagement, for example, two of the components that we see here. And what exactly is nutrition education? So Isabel Contento, which is a well-known researcher, she established this definition in 2007, And we can say that nutrition education is a combination of educational strategies which are designed to facilitate voluntary adoption of food choices and other food and nutrition related behaviors. And these behaviors will lead to general health and well-being. And it's important that the education that is delivered through multiple venues and involves activities at the individual, community, and policy level. So this definition really ties in to the WSSE model, which is the model that we saw on the previous slide, because it is addressing that nutrition education is a comprehensive approach. And it's important because we know that adequate nutrition leads to healthier children, and that healthier children are better learners. And how exactly does nutrition help children be healthier? First of all, it helps students maintain a healthy weight. And so by helping students establish healthy eating habits at an early age, you can help reduce their risk of obesity and their likelihood of developing chronic diseases down the line. Nutrition education also helps students establish healthy eating behaviors and an overall healthier lifestyle. So for example, by exposing children to unknown foods, you can increase their acceptance of these foods. Because of this, we want to make sure that we are introducing students to healthy foods like grains, fruits, and vegetables with the goal of increasing their acceptance of these and ultimately their intake of these foods. And in the next slide, we will go over some specific examples of the nutrition and health tie. Here we also have a statistic from the 2015 Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System, which is better known as a YRBS. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, it is a survey that is administered through the CDC every other year in states throughout the nation and in the district. It's administered to high school and middle school students. And the survey monitors 6 types of health risk behaviors that contribute to the leading causes of death and disability in youth and adults. And one of these risk behaviors is unhealthy dietary behaviors. And many of your schools may have just participated in the latest survey since it just took place this spring. And so in this statistic here on the screen, it's a statistic from 2015, and you can see that in 2015 in that survey, only 12% of high school students reported consuming vegetables at least 3 times during the previous week. And those of you that are familiar with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA's guidelines, know that the recommendation is that we consume the equivalent of 2.5 cups of vegetables every day. So consuming vegetables only 3 times a week, these students are far from meeting the recommendations. And even more worrisome is the fact that this 12% in 2015 was down 15% from the previous survey, which took place in 2012. And so this really demonstrates that there is an urgency for us to enhance the quality and the quantity of the nutrition education that we're providing to help youth understand the importance of consuming more healthy foods and vegetables, and healthy foods like vegetables in this case. And all this to say that nutrition education is important because it can help your students improve their eating habits, making them healthier and ultimately better learners. And so here in this slide, we have some specific samples. These are research-based examples that the CDC put together, and we can see how this is all tied to academics. And so in this slide, you see some studies where they found that the student participation in the USDA school breakfast program was associated with increased academic grades and standardized test scores. Students were absent less, and their cognitive performance was improved. And likewise, skipping breakfast was associated with decreased cognitive performance among the students. So these students were less alert, they were able to concentrate less, their memory was not as sharp, and they were not as good in problem solving. The second row here, the third row, I'm sorry, we see that lack of adequate consumption of specific nutrients led to lower grades. And these specific nutrients were specifically vitamins A, B6, B12, vitamin C, folate, iron, zinc, and calcium. And then these were also associated with higher rates of students being absent and being late. And so if we start thinking about how these can possibly lead to these results, a lot of these vitamins and minerals are important to our immune system, and so students may be getting sick more often, and then they're more likely to miss school, miss those lessons, and then they're going to end up with lower grades. So it really does all tie in together. And then lastly, they point out that hunger due to insufficient food intake is associated to lower grades, students being absent more often, more likely to repeat a grade, and their inability to focus. And so similarly, if you think about being hungry, you can relate to this as it's extremely hard to concentrate if you're hungry. And if you're going hungry more often, it likely means that you're not getting the necessary nutrients for your body. And then this could once again result in the students being sick. They're going to be missing school more often. They're going to end up having lower grades, and then they're more likely to repeat a grade. All right, and going back to providing nutrition education, it is important that the education delivered is effective. And for this, it is recommended that it focuses on behavior change and that it is delivered for an adequate amount of time. So effective nutrition education programs include changing behavior as a specific goal, educational methods that are appropriate to that goal, and then individuals themselves being involved in the problem solving and also the integration of a community approach. To focus on the behavior change, effective practices include goal settings where students can set individual goals to target specific behaviors. So if we think of a high school student, it can be a project to have them do an analysis of their current intake, how it compares to the recommended intake, and then having them pick one nutrient that they want to change their intake of, or just a general change that they want to implement, a time frame in which they're going to do this, and then a plan to make this change. And this can be a really great project. Additionally, it is recommended that the education that be delivered is delivered for a certain amount of time. And based on her research, Isabel Contento, once again, she suggested that between 40 to 50 hours of nutrition education are necessary in order for the education to be the most effective. And when she says the most effective, that means that it's going to create behavior change. Then in another study, it was found that 10 to 15 hours delivered over 1 to 4 months could enhance the knowledge, skills, behavioral expectations, and self-efficacy. The impact on behavior for this amount of time was minimal. So basically what the research is saying is that the more education, the better. And so here in the district, we have the Healthy Schools Act, which requires that students from kindergarten through grade 8 take at least 75 minutes of health education per week. And now this is for all health topics, and so it is difficult to know how much of it is dedicated to nutrition. Additionally, we do know that schools have a difficult time meeting this requirement. So the solution can be to really incorporate nutrition education wherever you can. So you can incorporate it throughout the school day, you can incorporate it before and after school in different activities and in other subjects that we're going to talk about now. All right, and so in this section we'll go into different subjects and how nutrition can be incorporated into each. The first one is science. So here you can talk about the many chemical reactions that take place to grow our food and within our body after we eat. So we can teach students about specific nutrients, and while we do that we can refer to the periodic tables. Some ideas are to use nutrition-themed science fair projects. You can educate students about the science of cooking, either in an actual food lab or just through videos and different equations. You can also teach students about photosynthesis, what the process is, and it's tied to healthy eating. So we know that during the process, as you carbohydrates are made. These are needed for energy, and so it's a great way to explain the process, and it's tied to the human body. And if you have actual plants, that's great. You can actually, have students have this interaction with the plants. If you have a garden, you can take them out to the garden. If not, videos, diagrams, that's a great way to have this activity. Another way to incorporate nutrition is in math. And so math, you can incorporate a lot of equations that are related to nutrition, very basic equations or very elaborate equations. So when we're talking about young students, you can teach them how to add and subtract with fruits and vegetables. So, have a few bananas, have a few oranges out there, and then talk about adding, subtracting, and then as you're doing that, talk about how those fruits are good for the body and how they help students grow strong. You can do the same thing with vegetables, and you're also just introducing them to a variety of fruits and vegetables. With measuring cups, you can talk about fractions and then tie that to the recommended portions of fruits and vegetables. So tying that to my plate, tying that to the recommendations of each food group, and showing them physically, what these measuring cups look like, and then adding and subtracting fractions and so on. Other students can keep older students can keep a diary, and they can use Super Tracker. For those of you that are not familiar with it, Super Tracker is a resource by the USDA in which you can log your foods and get a report of your nutrient intake. And students can do this and to see how much they are consuming out of the recommended amounts. And so they can learn percentages this way. How much of the recommended amount of fat are you consuming in a day? What percentage? It's a good way to integrate that. And then for older students, they can also learn about affordable, healthy foods by identifying healthier options and developing a menu that they can consume within their specific budget. And so this can be a really engaging activity, and you can make it as simple or as complex as you want it to be. It can be a pretty extensive project. You can have students visit grocery stores in the area, compare grocery stores, grab different items, look at the nutrient components of those items, and then tie that to the price, and then have them set a budget and have them pick the healthiest foods that they can pick within that budget. When you're teaching English, you can have students spell different words related to nutrition. So choosing words of uncommon fruits, vegetables, and grains, and having them spell those words, and then at the same time introducing them to these items by showing them a picture, can really expand their knowledge on a variety of plant-based foods that exist. You can teach students proper writing with a topic around wellness, nutrition, or physical activity. So just pick a topic and then have them write an essay around it. You can also have students give a presentation to their classmates. And so an optional topic is that of persuading their peers to adopt healthier eating habits. And so, for example, in this case, students would present on what those healthier habits are and why they should adopt them, and some of the possible consequences of following an unhealthy eating pattern. And as we're looking at the educational standards, which we'll get into a little bit later in the webinar, for the older students, we know that these are focusing less and less on learning concepts, but they're focusing on their application. And so having students apply their nutrition knowledge to persuade others to eat healthier is a really great way to do this. OSSE has also developed 2 great resources that have a variety of books that focus on comprehensive health and physical education. We have the Healthy Schools book list, and this book list focuses on grades kindergarten through 5, and it has a variety of books that are health related, like nutrition related, cooking, gardening, there's environmental literacy, there's physical activity. And then the second book list here is the Health and Physical Education book list. And this one goes all the way through grade 12. And this book list, every book that's in here has actually been already aligned for you to the DC Health Education Standards, the Next Generation Science Standards, and the Common Core Standards. And so you will get these slides, and if you click on the links, you can download the PDF version of the book list. And you can also contact us if you are interested in obtaining a printed copy. We do have those available as well. All right, now in social studies, this is a really fun subject to incorporate nutrition into because you can teach students about the various cultures and their customs. So students at any age can do a project about the history of various foods, both common and rare foods, and you can tie this to that particular area's country, their culture, their customs. Older students can be tasked with analyzing a traditional recipe from a particular country to see what these ingredients are, which nutrients they contain, and how these nutrients have evolved over time. And you can take this assignment even further by having students come up with a healthier version of the traditional recipe utilizing substitute ingredients and amounts. Another idea is to choose a food item in various stages of processing. So for example, a sweet potato. You can talk about the fresh version, the canned version, the cubed sweet potato, the candied sweet potato, a pie, chips, and talk about the history of this vegetable, how it evolved over time, and how the different processing methods came to be because of us, because humans had certain desires, certain needs. And you can take it even a step further by comparing the labels in each item and then addressing their nutritional components. Right. So creativity is important, and a great way to develop it is through art. So younger children can learn about the colors with fruits and vegetables, really basic, talk about green and red apples or yellow bananas. And you can teach them that they should eat the rainbow. So when we talk about eating different colors, teach them about that. And then students can create a drawing or a 3D presentation of what the recommended foods and portions are using MyPlate. So taking MyPlate and having them create their own version of a plate. So what will their MyPlate look like? You can make this very engaging with a variety of materials. And then with the older students, you can have them also develop creativity by creating advertisements that promote healthy eating, its importance, and how to adopt healthy eating behaviors. And this can even be in contests. I know that with the older students, it's great to really engage them through competition. And so maybe they have a contest as to who developed the best advertisement around healthy eating and why it's important. And then OSSE also has an art and essay contest that's every year during Growing Healthy Schools Month. The next contest should be announced in early September. So be on the lookout for that if it's something that you're interested. But younger students can submit, different kinds of paintings using crayons, color pencils, or anything that you want them to use. And then older students, they can also submit some artwork, or they can submit photography. We've had schools submit some great photography from their students. There is a monetary price usually available for this, and the school also gets some recognition. So this is a good opportunity if you want to engage your students in a competition. And then when we're talking about technology, we know that being familiar with and knowing how to optimally use technology in today's world is a necessity. And you can really teach your students how to use computers and different applications while they learn about nutrition. So there are a variety of online games that teach nutrition concepts available. The link here will take you to interactive games where students learn the food groups, and these are through the USDA. Then we also have BAM Dining Decisions. So this is an app developed by the CDC. So if you have tablets in schools, or if your students have a smartphone, this can be an opportunity to have them download that free app and engage with them. This app helps them make healthy choices and decide which foods deliver more energy, or which foods are more likely to help them build muscles, or just which foods can be eaten only sometimes, so which of these foods to limit. We already mentioned Super Tracker, and this is an online tool by the USDA. And this tool also has an entire curriculum that you can use for high school students. So you can have a lesson that focuses on healthy snacking, another lesson that focuses on breakfast. And here's a link to the lessons. Again, the tool is online, so a good opportunity to have students browse through the web and utilize computers. And then the last idea that's here is to have students search the web through a variety of platforms so that you can teach them how to find reliable sources of nutrition information. And so we know that there is tons of nutrition information out there and that it can be very hard to decipher what's accurate, what's not. And so giving them an assignment where they can search different platforms and then learn how to identify which are reliable sources and which are not is a very important activity that's really going to help them. And then we have physical education and physical activity. So this is an opportunity to engage students and have them be active. You can, for example, have a relay race, and students can either learn about the food groups as they make their own My Plate meal, or they can just match a food with the food group. And so you can have them kind of run back and forth in teams and be able to identify which foods should go under which food group. You can have your class participate in the yearly Brain Boost competition, and so this is also an activity that takes place during Growing Healthy Schools Month, so be on the lookout. We would be advertising that again early September, and this teaches the students about the tie between physical activity and brain functioning, and so how it is important for them to be physically active in order for their brain to really function optimally. And then the last example that we have here is to have them establish a goal to adopt both healthier eating and physical activity practices. And so once again, with the older students, you can make these very elaborate. You can have them develop a plan, have them track how they feel with the changes. So maybe you're having them keep some sort of diary where they notice that their mood is enhanced, that they're more attentive in class, and so that they can really be able to make that distinction of how they feel better when they're more physically active, and they can really take that with them through life. And then here we just have a slide with additional opportunities on integrating nutrition education throughout the school day. You can do so around the school by displaying infographics about the items that are served in school and how these are different from those in the past because of smart snack regulations. Or you can display a variety of educational messages about healthy eating throughout the campus as a reminder of its importance. And then here's a link to Smart Snacks, the USDA webpage, and they do have this like infographic that you're welcome to print out and maybe post around vending machines or anywhere else that students are likely to buy snacks, so that they can know that these snacks are healthier and why they're healthier, how they're healthier, and its importance. You can, if you have a school garden, you can really combine science and nutrition. And so OSSE has a planting calendar, which is a useful resource to help you plan your lesson. And then there are also several school garden-based curricula that incorporate math, science, and environmental concepts. These are both on our website, and I encourage you to take a look at them as resources. And you can also show documentaries or have a motivational speaker during a school assembly one day, and take your students on a field trip so that they can get that hands-on experience. So it's great if you're able to take them on a farm field trip or a science or history museum, and then have them have a different experience outside of the classroom as they learn about nutrition. And as you're planning your lessons, you want to make sure that you're aligning them to the educational standards. So here we have a slide on the DC, the 2016 Health Education Standards. I'll go over these briefly. I'm sure many or most of you are familiar with these. But these were revised in 2016 in partnership with the State Board of Education, and they reflect the changing landscape and the latest health trends in the district. So the revision included input from a variety of experts, including nutritionists and the educators that actually implement the standards in schools. And they provide a clear, skill-based, and age-appropriate approach to the essential health topics that impact district students. They also reflect best practices and evidence-based approaches, and they have been aligned to the National Health Education Standards, and they reflect that model that we saw in that one of the first slides, which is the whole school, whole community, whole child model. And so when you're looking at activities that you can align to the different core subjects, you need to use the health education standards to determine what it is that you should be teaching your students in terms of knowledge and skills, with the goal that they will maintain and improve their health. And so here we have an example of the standards, and they are organized by grade band, which you can see at the top. And the grade bands are kindergarten through grade 2, grade 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12. And then pre-K has been removed from these standards because we do have the district's early learning standards, which addresses the younger learners. The goal of the grade bands is to really allow more flexibility in implementation. And so the way these work is that students in grade 5 should have mastered all the concepts in the entire 3 to 5 grade band before moving on to grade 6. The standards are categorized into 6 different health education categories. And in this example, the category is category number 1, which is mental and mental and emotional health. And each category is identified by a different color. And then on the lower left-hand corner, you can see how the standards are organized. The top row is the category, followed by the 8 strands, and then each strand corresponds to one of the 8 National Health Education Standards. And the DC standards are listed under the strand in which they have been aligned to. They are numbered according to the grade band, followed by the category, followed by the strand, and then ending in the number of the standard. And so category 5 is the nutrition category. Once again, it's organized into the same 8 strands and divided into the same 4 grade bands. And it's important to keep in mind that the standards build upon each other. So if a student didn't grasp the concepts in the 3 to 5 grade band, they may have a difficult time when moving to those in 6 to 8. And so we really want to encourage you to refer to these standards as you develop activities for your students to ensure they are receiving comprehensive education around nutrition education that's both evidence-based and age-appropriate. Additional categories that cover some important topics that are related to food and health include Category 2, which is safety skills. It has some standards around warnings on labels. And Category 4, which is disease prevention, has some important food safety concepts such as the spread of bacteria, hand hygiene, and dental care. So it's important to also incorporate these somehow. Right, now knowing how to use the DC Health Education Standards, you can align your lessons to other educational standards like the Next Generation and Common Core. Here you see an example of how you can align the health education standards to the Next Generation science standards. And so for instance, in kindergarten through grade 2, you can have students make observations of plants and animals and compare the diversity of life in different habitats. As you are teaching your students these concepts, you can have them categorize foods according to food sources and food groups. You can see how they can do so at the same time. So they can make observations and then use these observations to categorize plants and animals. You can have them categorize foods into plant and animal proteins and teach them those concepts. And then as you go down the list here, you can see how, as you're teaching students about a particular science concept, you can take some time to incorporate information and activities on how these tie to health and why it is important to them. And so it is recommended that you take some time to do this ahead of time and incorporate as many health concepts as you can into your lessons. If we're looking at the last one, for example, here, it talks about carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, how they form a sugar molecule, and how they may combine with other elements to form amino acids and other carbon-based molecules. And so as you're doing that and teaching them those concepts, you can describe the dietary guidelines and talk about the food groups and talk about the, what are carbohydrates made up of, what are proteins made up of. So how do those make the macronutrients that we then consume, and why are those macronutrients important? So really making this tie from one set of educational standards to the other educational standards and picking an activity that allows you to incorporate them both together. All right, and then for the next set of slides, we'll talk about current resources that are available through OSSE and how you can request technical assistance about this or anything else related to health education and services. Here we have some OSSE-developed resources. We have, again, the DC Health Education Standards, which we talked about. We have a health and wellness menu of professional development services and technical assistance. And this menu, we're coming up with a newer version, and so you'll have the most up-to-date list of webinars, in-person trainings, professional development opportunities, anything else that's offered through our division around nutrition, physical activity, sexual health will be in this guide. So it's a really important document that I encourage you to take a look at to see if there's anything that you're interested in incorporating into your school year. We have the two book lists that were previously mentioned. Here you can actually see the cover of these. And then we have a nutrition curriculum review guidance document. So this is a new document that was just released this week, and it's been in the works for a long time. It took us a long time to get it to where it is. But basically, we reviewed several different nutrition curricula using the CDC's Health Education Curriculum Analysis Tool, which is better known as the HECAT. And using this tool, we had at least 3 reviewers review an assigned curriculum, and then we averaged those scores and we have published these scores for you. And what the HECAT does is that it really makes sure that the curriculum is covering all of the concepts that are necessary at each age, and that it's doing so in a way that is continuous and appropriate and evidence-based. It also analyzes if the curriculum is, feasible as far as its implementation, if it's affordable. So it's a very, very comprehensive tool, and we've put all of the analyses from this tool into one document for you. So if there's a curriculum that you've been interested in adopting around nutrition, we encourage you to take a look at this document, see if it's already been analyzed, and seeing how it fits with your school and seeing if that's the appropriate tool. And then complementary to this resource is the HECAT crosswalk. When we did our initial review, we used an older version of the HECAT, and so we wanted to come up with a document that showed that the differences were minimal, and also to show the alignment to the DC Health Education Standards. And so this crosswalk, that's what it does for you. Now the Healthy Schools and Wellness Programs team, starting in March, it now has drop-in technical assistance hours, and you can receive support on any of the WSIC model's components. One of them, health education, nutrition environment services, community involvement. So any of these components, any kind of assistance that you want around this, we're offering this through our technical assistance hours. Here's a link if you want to place a request to come in. And then these other slides cover some federal resources. So we have the USDA's Team Nutrition. They have an entire resource library with a variety of resources from reliable organizations or other states. We have MyPlate, which MyPlate has a lot to offer. One of it is Super Tracker. It has the USDA mixing bowl, which talks about recipes, has a portion distortion page and activities, and then it has lots of videos and print materials that are available to schools. USDA also talks about food safety, and I included the link here. Food safety is really important to incorporate into anything that's tied to nutrition. If you're doing any food tasting activities, or if you're teaching your students about food safety, it's always very important to have those concepts in there. And then the CDC has the HECAT, which I just talked about. It's that tool that we use to do our curricular reviews. They have the School Health Index, which is a tool that can be used by schools to assess their policies. And so it's a self-assessment basically, and it also helps you plan. It's all online, and schools can use it to improve their health and safety policies and programs. And so we do have a training on the School Health Index, which would also be on that menu that I just referenced, and so you can see how you can register for the School Health Index. And then they have a resource here on hand washing, which is very important to prevent contamination and the spread of diseases. And then the FDA has two free curricula that are available, and they refer to these as challenging, hands-on, minds-on activities that link food safety and nutrition to students' everyday lives. So I encourage you to take a look at these. They are organized into a modular format that can easily fit into science, health, and other classes. So it might be a good curriculum to implement in the science course. And with that, we have reached the end of my talking and the time for your questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in now. I am happy to answer these. Also, if you have any questions after the webinar, you are more than welcome to reach out to me. I'll stay on here for a few minutes to answer any questions. And I will also, like I said, be sending out these slides to you so that you do have all the links that were here and you can access those resources.